We hope you, and there's one from France. Where's our visitor? There's our visitor from France. We hope you enjoyed today's meeting and come back again. Any visitors want to learn about becoming a member, please see Ricky Walters after the meeting. And also, John Lumen's name is not Newman, it's Lumen. And he was the greeter today, but Mike Costerman was very upset because he didn't get greeted.
I said, why did you call him Newman? He said, well, he kind of reminds me of Alfred Newman. We thought the other people thought they could find the name of Newman on Seinfeld.
There we go. But I do want to thank John for today, for being today's greeter. And I want to thank Angela for working in attendance. I want to thank Kathy and Bill for always coordinating the assignments and the treasury. I want to thank Ricky for all of his work every meeting, and Brad and Corey for creating the events that we have, or the programs that we have. Today we're going to do a pledge again, and Richard Mankins will lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Richard. Please be seated. At this time, I'd like to wish Nancy Harrington a belated happy birthday. She turned, well, I won't tell what she turned, but she looks like she's in her early 40s. So, but her birthday was August 29th. And Gary and Phoebe Swaggerly are celebrating today their 38th wedding anniversary. Tomorrow.
Peter McDonald.
What's Peter McDonald?
Did you just have a birthday?
Did you just have a birthday? When? Oh, well, happy birthday. I think we should sing happy birthday to both Peter and Nancy. Everybody ready? Right. What's that? Oh, is Larry here?
No, he was going to sue, but he couldn't figure it out.
Well, we'll sing loud enough and he'll hear us. Okay. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Okay, we need Jim. Jim is going to do our We Care. Jim Golset and Brad Hurst.
Thank you. Yeah, you can use the chair. Thank you. Thank you, President Jim. Today, I'd like to talk briefly about one of the tenets of Rotary, and that's peace through understanding. How many people have been to an Olympic Games event? Have been to an Olympic Games, an Olympiad. My wife and I have been to two. Steve McCoy Thompson just went to Paris. He's going to speak in a moment. Those athletes do more good for international peace than all the politicians can screw up in 2 years. And I'd just like to recount a few experiences that I've had. We were at the opening ceremonies in 1984 in Los Angeles, at the Los Angeles Coliseum. And everybody was trying to get in. It was a highly secured event. They had all the fences, all the gates, and people were pushing on them. We were in the crowd. And all of a sudden, a man raises his hands and he says, "We are all Americans. Let's stand back." The whole crowd moved back. We went into the stadium. We met a gentleman there in 1984 who'd been to the opening ceremonies in 1932. He was a teenager then and had saved his money mowing lawns so he could go to the opening ceremonies of the Olympics, was there again in 84. And he was a true inspiration. He talked about the Olympics in 32 and how much larger event it was in 84. One day, our family, we had our children with us, and we went out on the lawn in Exposition Park. And we're taking a break, and so everybody's sitting down, and there's a gentleman sitting by himself next to us. We have no idea who he is, other than he had a heavy foreign accent, and he said, "I'd like to go for a walk. Would you folks mind watching my cameras?" And he had about 3 very expensive looking cameras. We said, "Sure." He said, "I'll be back in about 20 minutes. Okay, that's fine. He came back. It was a good 30 minutes. Everybody was still there. Nobody took any cameras. We met another 2 gentlemen who were in the military and at the Tokyo Olympics, and they went to Moscow in 1980 when the Americans boycotted Moscow. In Russia, at the opening ceremonies, the Americans were introduced and got a standing ovation from the Russians. In 1984, the Russians boycotted Los Angeles. Romania was one of the Eastern Bloc countries that came. When the Romanians entered the stadium, the entire Coliseum stood up to welcome them. We went to Salt Lake City in right after 9/11, which was just a few months. So that was a highly secured event, and everybody had to be searched. And the people, the volunteers there, were very appreciative of you coming and apologetic that they had to search your bags. But it was amazing, and everybody got along. That was the ceremonies that Mitt Romney took over after the big scandal, financial scandal. The opening day in Park City was massive congestion, as you can imagine. Mitt Romney and Steve Young got out there and directed traffic. So that's the kind of things that happen at the Olympics, and it's all brought on by those young men and women who sacrifice for years and years in order to go and perform their best. Now I'd like to turn it over to Steve Thompson. He'll talk a little bit about Paris.
Thanks, Brad. That was great. I'll keep this brief. Thank you. Bienvenue aux États-Unis. Paris was amazing. It really captured the spirit of what we all should be about. Paris did a fantastic job. There were so many volunteers everywhere offering to help, not getting paid, just wanting to be there in the spirit of the Olympics. The apps, I will say, that the Paris provided to get around were phenomenal. But most importantly, again, just a couple of vignettes. We went to a cycling competition outdoors by the Place de la Bastille, and there was just camaraderie with all these people from different countries and sharing phones and cheering for people from other countries as they cycled past. It really didn't matter because you know what it takes to get there. We would go out to restaurants and you couldn't speak the language, but you could share phones and stories. So it was phenomenal. You're absolutely right. It's one of those few events that brings people together who are so separate normally. And I just want to encourage you as a Los Angelino, go to the Olympics in the 4 years from now, right? So in 28, be there. You will feel the spirit. It's worth the trip. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Brad. All right, I'd like to welcome any visiting Rotarians and ask that they be introduced. Visiting Rotarians.
They picked you, Mike. I didn't.
I would like to welcome from the Rotary Club of Dublin in the category of, I think, electrical contractor
Your memory is outstanding.
and also electrical expert witness. What else?
My name.
I'd like to welcome Mr. Bob Tutnott.
Do we have any other visiting Rotarians? How about guests of Rotarians?
I'd like to introduce my grandson, Jean-Pierre Destinier, right? Did I say it right? Destinier from, he lives in Paris. He just finished his master's program. He's going to take some time in the States here, do a little traveling and get on with life.
Welcome.
All right, we have some announcements. Oh,
Yes, hello, you're there.
hello, Dennis.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you guys.
Your volume's off or something.
Volume's off.
Volume must be down. I don't know.
We can
see you. We can see you, Dennis. Yeah, good.
Lip read. Welcome, Dennis.
Thank you, guys.
And we do have some announcements. Steve Van Dorn first has an update.
Thank you, Mr. President. So 37 days and counting until the Halloween Spirit Run. Everybody ready? So just wanted to, give you an update on where things are. And thanks to that young lady back there with the glasses and the brunette hair, Kathy Alameda, she's keeping us on track. So Kathy, thank you so much for everything you're doing. Hopefully you received the sign-up sheet. She's basically assigned everyone to a job. So if for some reason you can't do the job that she has you listed doing, please let her know as soon as possible so we can find a replacement or get someone else to do it. So this is really important because without you helping us out, the race isn't going to happen. So some numbers for you. Right now, as of yesterday, from the Google document that Kathy shared with me, we're at about $32,000 in sponsorships. Sounds like a lot, but we got a ways to go. We had 50,000 plus last year. So we need some more sponsors to come in. I just talked to Richard today, and Mark's going to speak about this as well. We've got some more coming in. So if you are with a business, a friend, please pass along that sponsorship sheet. If you don't have it, I'll be happy to send it to you. And as far as registrants for the race, as of yesterday, we were at a little bit over about 130. This time last year, we were at 77, and the year before that, in 2022, we were at 91. So we're beating the pace from years past, but that can change quickly. So keep telling people about the race. What day is the race? All right, you got it. Okay, great. Mark, you're going to say a few words, and thank you all for your help in advance.
Thank you, Steve, and just wanted to thank the publicity team. They produced some posters here. I was hoping maybe Jim, could you pass these around here and ask people to put that in the window of your business? Does not have to be downtown Pleasanton, right? We try to reach out to other communities, Dublin, Livermore in particular. So we've got many more posters we can hand out, and of course in a couple of weeks we're going to have another version of this poster that'll include all of the key sponsors. So thank you very much.
Great. Just want to make one comment about there's a big column there by the True Value Hardware Store that advertises upcoming events here in downtown Pleasanton, and we don't have a poster there. So that's one of the things we want to make sure whoever controls that column that advertises events, get a hold of them and get a poster there. So we were talking about it earlier, so we need to make sure we get one out there. And as Mark just said, you got other businesses or friends that would like to put a poster up. Let's make sure we do that.
And just a reminder, the money that we raise for this, along with the poker tournament, is what funds our scholarships and our wheelchairs, our wash projects, and many other projects that we do throughout the country and the world. So thank you so much for your help. And Jim.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Richard. At this time, I'd like to ask Dick Stafford to come forward. Dick? Where are you? Over here. Okay. You already are.
I am for it.
That's so good.
Thank you. Thank you, President Jim. Just a quick update on wheelchairs. We are still planning the first week in November for the Peru distribution trip. Bill Wheeler, I thought, was going to be here to do some presentation today, but he had to leave unexpectedly. So we are still, like I said, planning that week of November 3rd. Pretty much everything's set, except we're not quite sure on the end date for those that want to extend beyond the original 7 days. So we'll be getting back, Bill will be getting back with a lot more information for those of you who have signed up. There's still time if you want to go to sign up. Like I said, those are great trips. They really show the impact of the whole wheelchair program. One more item, I have now brought money up to the Wheelchair Foundation. So we got the match. So we now have paid for another container that will be targeted for distribution in the first quarter of next year. So moving forward, and then with hopefully continued contributions or continued input from our fundraisers, we're halfway to another container. So hopefully we'll be able to do 2 containers next year. So again, I encourage you to get involved in the program, and that just means finding out the history of what we've been doing and helping us raise money to move this forward. So that's it. Jim, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dick. And Steve McCoy Thompson has an announcement.
Are you tired of me yet?
Yes.
These are the gifts, right? So we went to the Paris Olympics. We got to stay with friends who had a lovely place downtown, so it made it really lovely and worthwhile. And we brought back a few gifts for our president. Yeah, don't you think? So this is for your beer.
Okay.
Believe it or not, that is supposed to be a French chapeau that they wore during the Revolution.
I remember that on TV.
I don't know why they chose that as their mascot. Yeah, no one knows. Yeah. And then, and then this is for your coffee the morning after your beer. So yeah. And then what Olympics would be complete without pins? So this is a pin from gymnastics. You wear proudly, and when you go to the
I get fined. Oh, wait, I'm president.
when you go to the Olympics in LA, you can trade those pins.
Okay.
Right. And then this is a pin. They would have these countries would have different houses. So there was a Kenya house.
Okay.
So I just want to share that with you. They're beautiful. So, and I'll be writing a check donation to Rotary to whichever committee is nicest to me today. Okay.
Thank you very much. Can I keep the bag? Yes. Yes. Thank you. One second. Let me get everything back into it. It's fine. It's fine. Thank Mary. All right, Ricky Walters has an announcement.
Quickly, as you may know or don't know, past President Steve and myself are both board members with Sunflower Hill, and our big gala is the 21st of this month, 2 weeks from this Saturday. And we have sold out, which is awesome, but we need some volunteers to do the registration. You don't need many skills. You just need to come a little early, sit there and help check people in. I know that Jake, I just saw him on Zoom. He helped us as a volunteer and his wife a couple years ago when we did our fundraiser. So if you would like to help out on the 21st Saturday evening, would you please see me afterwards? Really appreciate some volunteer help if you don't have anything else going on that evening. Thank you very much.
Big help.
It is at the Black Hawk Museum. Thank you.
All right, so where were we? Oh, Ricky, we have a song.
Make sure the volume's done now. Please.
Hello, fellow Rotarians. Today's song is This Little Light of Mine. And I want you to sing it fine like I know you kid. Let's go. That's great.
Thank you, Don. And we have a Rotary International video.
Cowboy, yeah.
Thank you, Ricky. And now I'd like to have Cove come up. And he's our speaker for today.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Oh, come on, you guys can do better than that. Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians, guests, and our friend from France, Jean-Pierre, is correct? Welcome. So I'm going to talk about a story. I'm going to start off by telling you once upon a time, but that usually means it's a fairy tale. This is not a fairy tale. This is a true story. No embellishments. I'm just going to tell you like it is, and then we'll ask questions afterwards. So I was 21 years old. It was 1966 and Vietnam was going on, and 55,000 guys a month were being drafted to go into the military and head over to Vietnam with an M16. How many of you were in the service at that particular time? Anybody? Okay, 1, 2. Okay. So in that period of time, there was a lot of consternation in the United States about the war. A lot of protests going on. I ended up at Fort Ord with 10,000 other guys, and a interview team from Washington, D.C. came out to the West Coast for the first time in 10 years. And they basically did a computerization and narrowed down to 150 guys. They asked those 150 guys, well, no, they told those 150 guys to show up at the mess hall that morning and basically said, here's what's going to happen if you follow through with what we're offering and you get selected. You're going to be not be in a barracks. You're not going to wear a uniform. You're not going to be in the regular military. You're going to wear a coat and tie, and you're going to be in Washington, D.C. Well, that sounded pretty good to a lot of us. So we said, let's go back to the second interview in the afternoon. But they told us during that morning session, don't lie to us. Don't mislead us. Don't not tell us the truth, or we will have your behind. And so half the group didn't turn back in the afternoon. My best friend, we were in the Army on a buddy system, which means we gave them 4 years to avoid Vietnam and gave them 4 years guaranteed Germany. Well, he didn't show up in the afternoon. I never found out why. He wouldn't tell me. But he ended up going to Vietnam anyway as a MP in the, went to OCS and became an MP officer and ended up in Vietnam. There's a 3-man interview team that came out. And this interview team hadn't been, like I said, to the West Coast in 10 years. I can't repeat exactly, but they said, have you done? And so they, remember, back in those days, there was no such thing as a politically correct language. So they spoke like my drill sergeant did. They spoke, which is not what you wanted to hear, but that's how they talked. And so they interviewed us. So of the roughly 75 guys that came into the afternoon session, 8 passed the interview, 6 passed the lie detector test that day, and 2 of us ended up passing the FBI background investigation. And they then sent me off to Fort Gordon, Georgia. They decided they were going to make me a switchboard operator. Didn't tell me where I was going yet, but I ended up in Washington, D.C., and I joined an outfit called WHCA, WHCA, White House Communications Agency. If you go to Wikipedia today and you look it up, it's basically going to tell you it's the premier communication organization in the government. It provides data, voice, and recording abilities for the president, the vice president, Secret Service, and the list goes on to any emissaries or people at the military organization, because WHCA is made up of Air Force, Army, and Navy personnel. They determine who gets the coverage, of course, at the direction of the president. I was assigned to a place in Virginia, about 35 miles outside of Washington, called Mount Weather, Virginia. And Mount Weather was named appropriately because it was nasty up there. But why it was chosen was because it had the largest single piece of granite in that part of the world. And so a mile down deep, a mile in, was what they called the relocation site for the White House. So you've seen those movies, the 1960 movies, the bomb movies with the big doors. You know, the doors are this thick. Well, there's a set of the doors just inside the tunnel. Second set of doors about 3/4 of a mile in. And when you got inside, as the Russians well knew, because the Russians had a ranch down below the mountain and they knew everything that went on. And you had this relocation site for the White House. So they could take the president at the moment they knew there was a launch from Russia. They could put him in the helicopter. They could get him up in the air and get him out to the site, get him in both sets of doors in less time than it took for the ICBM to hit. About 37 minutes total time. So that was the plan, that if he had to escape, he would come to Mount Weather, Virginia, and he would be in there with his cabinet, his staff, his main aides, etc. There were relocation sites all around metropolitan DC out in the countryside, not as secure in a place in the granite as we were, but secure sites for the FBI, for the Justice, the Department of Justice, for the Supreme Court, etc. And we were in communication with those sites all the time. My assignment to Mount Weather was to be there. We had a 24-hour crew. We were always there ready in case there was an incident. That was the point of us being there. But then I got assigned to the backup teams that came with the president whenever he went anywhere. So the military has control of the president's communication system once he leaves metropolitan DC or does not go to Camp David. So those 2 places are covered by civilians. But once he leaves anywhere, he goes to Hoboken, New Jersey, he goes to his in today's world to Rhode Island, to the beaches. He goes to Kuala Lumpur. Wherever he goes, there's going to be a system of people and equipment and systems of logistics and communications that go with him. So imagine this. Imagine we all kind of are familiar with Air Force One and its capabilities. I was on it one time. It's a fabulous course. It's updated now, but it was fabulous back then. So every time he goes someplace, they have to take an unbelievable amount of equipment. First of all, you got Air Force One, but then there's always Marine One, which is the helicopter. So they're not going to use the helicopter of another country. They're not going to use the cables to the telephone system of another country. They're not going to use anything that belongs to secure equipment from another country. They're going to bring it all with them. So imagine them loading up to go to Kuala Lumpur with the planes, the 8,000-pound bomb-proof, bulletproof presidential vehicle, the backup Secret Service vehicles that are also motorized and equipped with weapons. Anything they need, they have to transport on these big C-17s. So the advanced team, both the Secret Service and the communications in a place like Montevideo, Uruguay, which was my first trip, that starts 9 months out. Secret Service has to figure out all their issues. The communication people to figure out what they're going to do, how it's going to be done, etc. So, and then they get take all the equipment eventually and get it there and get it loaded up. When we got to the airport in Montevideo, again, my first trip, 1967, I'm from Ventura, California. That's where I grew up. So I'm a waspy kid, 21 years old, wet behind the ears, as naive as you can be. We go from the airport to the hotel, and I had never seen such poverty. Not till I actually got to the Appalachians in our country. And I saw it again. But the poverty was incredible, incredibly bad. It was heartbreaking. We get close to the Capitol, and we start to see on every corner armed militia, 4 or 5 guys on every corner, camouflage, machine guns. Not a sight that you want to see when you're a waspy kid, not 21 years old and naive. We get to the Capitol, and the Capitol is in front of the Capitol building of the country in Montevideo is a large park about 400 yards long and about 100 yards wide. And on the other side of the park is a 3-story hotel. Well, that's where Lyndon Johnson was going to be for a couple of days. Then he was going to go to a conference in Punta del Este, Uruguay, up the road a ways. And so as the advanced team that I was on 6 weeks in advance, we're now there to get the equipment set up, start running the equipment, make sure everything was going to work. The switchboards in those days, if the president says, give me Lyndon Johnson, give me a Lady Bird Johnson in Texas, we had to plug in, ring the phone, direct line right to the Texas ranch, wherever she would be, or the house, wherever she would be. I had not been outside much in the first couple of days. And then I walked around outside the building, and I turned around to the right side of the building. Now, this is a 3-story hotel, is a 1-story life-size poster of Lyndon Johnson. Well, that would be good, right? Except he had a swastika helmet, an armband with a swastika, a stogie in his mouth, rough beard, submachine gun, shooting children. That's the hotel he's going to stay in 6 weeks. So that was a shock. It eventually came down, but it was there when we were there. So what you start to learn is that these trips are interesting for not only history and for the moment, but they're interesting to see culturally, politically, what's going on around you. The best steak I've ever had was in Montevideo. It was tall, it was juicy, it was tender, and it was on my plate. And I put my fork and knife down, and I turned to my left. And next thing I know, my buddies are telling me your steak's disappearing. That's the signal for the waiters in Montevideo at that time that if you put your knife and fork down, you're done. So my steak was on the way back to the back of the kitchen. I obviously chased after it and got it back. But again, one of the cultural things you learn. We also found out that if you hire a cabbie at night and he drives down the street, there are no street lights, no stop signs, no stop lights of any kind. Not in 1967. And the cabbie would flash his lights twice. If he didn't see a flash coming back, he was still at 40 miles per hour going right through that intersection. So you just prayed. Yes, Steve, you prayed that you didn't have somebody come the other way. It didn't happen. We didn't, but I can imagine the accidents that did happen. In Manila one time, we were told by the embassy, we were always briefed by the embassy on what you didn't do or what you did in case of an emergency. In Manila, the brief was, well, if you get in a cab and you see that the papasan driving the cab is drunk or high on drugs, you get out of that cab as fast as you can and run. But if he hits somebody, like another papasan who has 13 dependents, if you don't get to the embassy before they get you, you now have 13 dependents of your own. That's the way it was in the Manila at that time. So every time we went to a country, there was a briefing on the issues that were going to affect us adversely or could affect us positively. My 6 weeks trips, there were many of them, but basically Montevideo, Uruguay, Manila, Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur, Paris, that was the joy. You know, being 6 weeks in Paris and being able to have the free time as much as we did, that was a joy. I did a lot of trips in the continental United States. Those would be maybe a week long, maybe 2 weeks at the most. But again, everywhere he goes as president, this whole cadre of people, equipment, etc., has to be there in advance, ready to go. So let's suppose he's in Europe. Let's suppose he's got 3 stops on a European tour. So you go into the first stop, and by the way, there's a team of people that are on a backup plane. So when Air Force One lands, right behind it is another plane. And on that plane are additional Secret Service, your additional communication staff, and they get them off that plane, race them to the location where he's going to be. And now that's the full support team to be there with him while he's in town. But let's suppose there's another stop. So what happens? That team is already in place. But the team that came in on the first stop now hopscotches to the third stop. So you've got all this equipment, all these people maneuvering around from maybe what may be a 2-hour meeting, a 2-day stay. It's amazing what takes place. There's a story about Johnson. And this one I never experienced, but one of my Secret Service friends told me that he had a two-story tower built in this Texas ranch and in the range. And he had a herd of deer. He'd take a bottle of whiskey, his rifle, and direct the Secret Service to bring the herd by. That's how he hunted. Yeah, there's lots of stories, just trust me. And by the way, if I still write today anything about it, I still go to jail. Let's suppose you're in DC one night with your buddies and you're out drinking and you have a little bit too much to drink and somehow you get in trouble and you end up in the police department. Well, here's the hammer. The next morning, as you're released from the police department, there would be orders backdated 6 weeks ago that said you weren't part of the White House last night. You'd been ordered 6 weeks ago to go to Fort Myers, the Light Infantry Division. And you'd be on the plane that morning with your hangover with the M16 and you're on your way to Vietnam. That was the hammer that was held over our heads. So you had to behave. You couldn't misbehave or you were now going to Vietnam whether you wanted to or not. So the worst trip of my life. We were in Montevideo. Steve, I didn't look at the clock. How much time do we have? Okay. We were in Williamsburg, Virginia. There was a conference going on. And there was a ranch, very big ranch house that we were in. And Lyndon Johnson's at one end of the house. And a Texas 80 had Christensen was at the other end of the house. And Christensen was just nice and polite and Texas easygoing, the soft drawl, and a nice guy. Johnson was at the opposite end of the house, and he's got 3 voices. 95% of the time, he's mean, gruff, and nasty. I mean, just plain out. 4% of the time, he's got this kind of easygoing, but he's still Lyndon Johnson. Then 1% of the time, he had this, we rarely heard it, he had this nice, soft, easygoing, comfortable, happy voice. Lyndon Johnson had a habit. The habit was, and it was a requirement, that every 10 paces there had to be a phone he could pick up and say, "Give me so-and-so, give me so-and-so, do this, do that." And our answer was, "Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, Mr. President," etc. And so he had this habit. When he changed places in the house, he would pick up a phone. We'd know he was on the move. Well, I'll be damned. On that day, these 2 guys switched into the house. Johnson didn't pick up a phone. He gets to the end of the house where Christensen was. And now Christensen is down where Johnson was. And Johnson picks up the phone, and I'm the lucky stiff that's on the switchboard. And the protocol says, I have to know it's him. I have to make a recording that says this is him on the phone. So he picks up the phone and following exactly what I was supposed to do, because I have to identify him, I said in a very professional, polite voice, Mr. President, I heard words and phrases come out of that mouth that I've never heard before, and I haven't heard since. And I would never want to hear them again because I was sure that I was going to be on that C-17 the next morning with an M16 in my hand. It didn't happen, obviously, only by the grace of God. But I was so nervous. Now, we had a direct line, trunk line, we called it. We could plug in, put the ringer on. I could get Lucy Bird as who he wanted. And I could find her immediately if she was at the Texas Ranch where she's supposed to be. Instead, I picked up the Williamsburg phone book, try to find Lucy Bird Johnson. That's how shook up I was. I didn't know what was going on at all. I was scared to death that I was on my way out of the organization. So I have the privilege of being cussed out by a president and still function. So if you go today to the history books or you go online and read about Lyndon Johnson and ask and look up why didn't he run for re-election? Well, the history will tell you that he was more concerned about the ending of the war as a non-political person than he was about running for re-election. Those of us in the White House communications agents that dealt with him on a regular basis, we never bought that story. At that period of time, we had, if we're going to go on a trip, we had to have a winter pack suitcase and a summer packed suitcase. And when they called us and say, okay, you're outbound, pick up your summer pack, that's all we knew. We had no idea where we're going. Not even that, the pilot of the plane that we were on to take us where we're going only had direction to a midway point. He didn't find out where he was going to finally fly the plane until he got to the midway point, and then there was such a fear of assassination. People had jumped the walls in the White House, the fences, and tried to get in. There was all kinds of things going on. Politically, they say he just didn't want to be in office. He wanted to end the war, and he wanted to do it as a non-politician. But we never bought that story because we experienced firsthand the fear that he had of being assassinated. Think about the Chicago riots, 1968 Democratic Convention. If you were around then, the riots were unbelievable. And so were the riots just in the cities of ours about the protest to the Vietnam War. So he was clearly afraid of what was going on. When Nixon was elected, so I got 1.5 years with Johnson. When Nixon was elected, I got transferred to Nixon's team. And I was in Palm Springs on the weekend or the week, I should say, when he started putting his cabinet together. And his chief of staff was H.R. Haldeman, who was one mean guy. That was Nixon's henchman. Johnson was his own bad guy. Haldeman was Nixon's bad guy, chief of staff, but so was Ehrlichman. Ehrlichman was the guy that orchestrated and did the planning for the Watergate break-in. And then you had John Dean, you had Colson, you had a whole bunch of guys. And John Dean is the one that turned state's evidence against the rest of them to get a reduced sentence of his. So interesting period of time. The personalities were that Johnson, like I said, was his own mean man. Nixon was always very polite and nice. I mean, that was his public nature. I never heard him cuss or swear or have a mean word. But again, Haldeman would do that for him. One time we're down at Key Biscayne where the Key Biscayne White House was, and there was 3 houses. The center house is the president's, the 2 on the side are communications and the Secret Service. And of course, they got the streets blocked off. And one of the Secret Service agents comes in and says, anybody got a camera? Well, I had a 35mm telephoto. Nixon wanted a picture of his future son-in-law and Julie Nixon because they were out on a boat in the little alcove. And he had on her floppy girl's hat laying back in the boat, and Nixon wanted a picture of that somehow. I never got the film back. I got my camera back, but not the film, you know. So that's pretty much about it. That was my 3.5 years in Washington in the White House Communications Agency. Many people have asked me, why didn't you stay? Well, there was no upward movement. There was no reason to stay. So I came back to California, went back to college, and that's the end of my military duty. So that's my presentation. If there's any questions, I'll gladly answer what I can. Rick. Ricky?
Did you fly on Air Force One?
One time, yeah. Well, it's just, I mean, you're planted in a seat the whole time. You're not going to get up and walk around except to go to the bathroom. It's an amazing plane. I mean, if you've ever seen any pictures of it, any movies of it, the communication systems are second to none. Remember, the White House Communications Agency had to be able to communicate with the airplane, with the Secret Service, with Marine One, with the Secret Service on the ground. Very complicated. And so as a result, you were a peon and you just didn't get up and move around if you're on Air Force One. If you're on the backup plane and you're with a bunch of other guys that were fine, but you didn't do much on the plane. But it was a marvelous experience to see what he flies in and what the capabilities of that plane are. So, Bill?
And now you're leapfrogging or leapfrogging from location to location. It made me think about the redundant systems that not be in place.
Yeah, exactly. They have backups for everything. I mean, there's a plan and a backup for every situation. He may have had to go in the Secret Service bomb-proof, bulletproof, weaponized vehicle, but they have a backup plan for every place they go. You had to in third world countries because there's always unexpected issues coming up. So, yeah. Yeah, Richard?
So the communications were all encrypted, secure communication. That's handled through the different areas, military, Navy, Air Force.
Yeah, the outfit was made up of Army, Navy, and Air Force personnel. At that time, yes, microwave mark is what we had back then. So whatever the ability was at that time to encrypt and send messaging, yes, but it was as good as it got. The systems weren't any better anywhere else. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Away with the overall impression of the office of the president.
Oh, absolutely. You know, back then, Steve, on the West Coast, we had no real world information about what happened in Washington. We were pretty naive. You know, we would only get the big blurbs. Back there, they live it every day. And at that time, you were always aware of what was going on. There was an occasion, and what I'm going to tell you now, this kind of a story would not be public. But there was an occasion where the JFK battleship had to be, I can't remember if it was a carrier or battleship, but it had to be christened. So you had the Kennedys and you had the Johnsons at the christening, and they didn't acknowledge each other. Maybe a nod. That was it. There was no love lost between those groups, none whatsoever. Now we would not know that, but yes, even back then, the power of the presidency is beyond your and my imagination. What the president can do, can force to be done, can create is unlimited. And that's the thing that I think is overwhelming, especially in today's world when we know what we know. It's hard to fathom the power. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm sure the same thing is true in France. It's hard to imagine the power that Macron has and at any country.
Well, I think Jim can talk about the power of the.
You mean he controls the gavel? Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay.
Something about there's certain things that you can't write about.
Oh, you signed a non-disclosure agreement.
So my question is, can you talk about things that are not limited?
Yeah, as long as there's not a press person in here. Yeah. Oh, thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah. Yes. You could still go to jail. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you signed a disclosure. It's described as what it is. I'm obviously made it pretty safe here. This is not anything significant that I disclosed. I mean, the Russians knew about mountain weather before I did. They had a farm, we'll call it a farm. Just like today's world, the Chinese are on our Air Force bases, our military bases. The Russians had people planted everywhere. And like I say, there was a ranch right down below the tunnel entrance. So they knew what was going on. And but that's the way it was.
Understood. You just can't talk about it.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, how much money I get for signing the NDA?
Ah, yeah, all right. Yeah. Anybody, Brad?
When the phone rings at 2 a.m. and emergency is the international incident, how do you get the communications to the president in his private residence?
Secret Service. Yeah, I mean, you contact the agent in charge of that group that night and they go right to him. Just some interest. So one thing I forgot to tell you, some of the guys in the outfit had been there 20 years already when I got there. But those guys were in the White House. The president says, give me so-and-so, find me Bob Shapiro. Well, you have to know who their girlfriends are, who their mistresses are, the bars they attend, the drugs they're on. You have, because you don't say, Mr. President, I can't find this person. That's not allowed. You have to find that person. So these guys with 20 years experience knew all those things. Us newbies had to learn as we went along. But there was always guys with such vast experience wherever we went that they could answer and respond to whatever he asked for. You don't say no to the president. You don't say, I can't find this person. It just doesn't happen. Yes, Joyce. Yes, the FBI investigation of the background of the last step was you had to have that because you were going to be, you had to have a top security clearance, at least at the first level, because you couldn't function in the organization without it. Yeah. Yes, sir. Oh, do you feel the pain of that, Mike? Well, I had gotten arrested as a young man at a junior college dance. I got too drunk and some rookie cop handcuffed me. And the judge presiding over that moment was the judge that replaced my grandpa. So he knew me. And he said, how do you think your grandpa would feel about this? I thought, oh no, don't do that to me. But he let me off and I had to tell him about that. And of course they investigated that and figured out it was not a deal breaker. Yes, sir.
Where were you in 1967 when Johnson came to the street and he wanted to do
I was on site at Mount Weather. I was on the board at that time. Little backstory going beyond that, the guy that was my supervisor had been there for many years, and there was a place in Jim. How are we doing in time? Okay.
Last question.
Okay, last question. So my predecessor, he was my boss. JFK used to fly out to Leesburg, Virginia, to a house the Secret Service had for him out there, and he would come out to play poker. And when he walked downstairs to the basement where the poker game was going to be held, he walked in as Jack, not Mr. President. And my supervisor would be at those poker games occasionally. So here he is, a 30-year-old plus non-com enlisted man playing poker with the president. He was actually on the switchboard in Mount Weather on the day he was assassinated. So.
The reason I asked that question, I was on active duty at Camp Roberts.
Okay.
With the 23rd Infantry Division. I was a division range officer. And the rumor was that all 21,000 of it were going to be activated and physically done.
Mm-hmm.
And that was 8 days of round and round, and everything silent. I was in one of the ranges, everything was silent when the speech was made. And he said, I'm not calling up the reserve in the first.
Well, I'm sure it did. I'm sure it did. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, Cove. That was fascinating. All right, so we have a opportunity drawing.
Okay, we have $76 and we need 2 tickets by you, my friend.
2 tickets. I'm not looking. I didn't buy any.
Okay. Call out number 655. 655. Look at who it is.
Okay.
Okay.
Feeling good.
Yep. Well, that was a nice try.
It's blue.
Yeah, Sarah, how about 659?
Well, it'll go into the tub for next time.
Next time.
Thank you, Kathy. Yes, Bob.
September 28th. We have a great dinner plan.
It's a Mexican theme. I think everyone had communication from Mike on this. So just asking everyone to, if you can come, let us know. If you can't come, let us know. We're trying to finalize the numbers on it. So please, everyone, if you can, join us.
Thank you, Bob. Oops, sorry. This meeting is adjourned.